Chapter 21. Inner Cry. Malto blasted at Senna in an explosion of red. He'd lit so fast that Senna only just managed to light his own flame to take a half step to the side before Malto sent him sprawling to the ground. Hella bit her hand in an attempt not to scream, her own flame lighting instinctively. Malto slid to a halt in front of a large tree and then, in the same motion, blasted off of it with one foot back in Senna's direction. This time, though, Senna looked prepared. As his opponent shot towards him once more, Senna crouched, grabbed a handful of dirt and leaves, and sprung straight up. Malto looked at him as he was passing underneath, only to be met with a high-speed shower of dirt particles from a now inverted Senna. The stocky Thootin howled and rubbed at his eyes, at which point Senna landed and launched himself into the back of Malto's knees, knocking him backward onto the ground. Before Malto could right himself, Senna ran up a tree trunk, then backflipped, landing like a cannonball on the man's stomach. Malto heaved as the blow knocked the air from his lungs. Senna stood up and planted his right foot on Malto's chest, pinning the winded and incapacitated Thootin. "Desist!" yelled Adun, who had stepped into the competition area. He walked over towards Senna and raised his hand. "Winner of round 1, Senna of Call by way of pin!" Hella screamed at that declaration. "Yeah, Finn!" Heads turned, some spectators frowning while others were muttering and grumbling. Fald shushed her, but she stuck her tongue out at him in return. "I figured that beef ball was soft in the midriff," Fald said, folding his arms and smiling. "You called it," Hella said, "though he had me worried at the start." "I'll admit his speed was surprising," said Fald, "but I think he underestimated little Finn. It was a dumb move to just rush straight towards him, let alone to do it twice in a row. He's either dense or has never been in an actual fight," Fald sneered, then added, "Maybe both." Hella smirked, but inside, she was just relieved her brother was unharmed. "Moving on to the next match," Adun proclaimed, stepping in front of the central rock as a breathless Malto dragged himself off to the side of the clearing. "In round 1 of side 2, Farah of Erant versus Venra of Paltir." The two Thootin women of the group stepped forward. Venra squared off opposite to Farah, who, standing with her arms crossed, exuded confidence in waves. In Hella's eyes, it almost felt like disdain for this woman. Adun stepped back into the safety of the competitor lineup, raised his hand, and brought it down with a hard, "Begin!" Venra lit up and blasted off backward towards a tree trunk and up into its branches. She bounced from branch to branch, tree to tree, at orthogonal angles, never staying in one place longer than it took to blast off in a different direction. However, Farah remained at the center of the clearing beside the rock, with her arms still crossed and her flame unlit. Murmurs from the spectators began to rise as people pointed, muttering to each other, clearly confused by Farah's inactivity. Hella's eyes widened as Venra suddenly abandoned her high-speed movement tactic for a high-impact direct attack towards Farah's back. Breaking her frenetic tempo and crouching for a full second to load up her legs with the power burst needed, Hella gasped as Venra exploded in a downward angle, foot first, towards Farah's blind spot. Appearing as a ruby streak of lightning shooting down upon Farah, the moment Venra connected, a shockwave of blinding red erupted. The explosion it caused bent the trees of the clearing backward. Hella braced herself, covering her eyes, but quickly looked back to see what had happened. Through the dust, she could see Farah standing, glowing red, and her opponent slumped against the center rock. Farah stood like an obelisk for a moment, rage pulsing from her in waves. She then walked over, grabbed Venra by the hair, and slammed a knee into her dazed face, shattering her nose. That sudden, brutal strike reduced Venra to a bloody, limp heap on the ground. Hella didn't even feel the impulse to cheer this time. Even though her friend had won, the ruthlessness she'd employed at the end left the young girl speechless. She wasn't alone in that either. Even Adun visibly cringed at Farah's quick and callous demolition of Venra. He stammered, "Desist!" Farah lowered her flame, swept a lock of hair out of her face, and walked back to the competitor line, expressionless. "She tracked her perfectly," Fald said without looking at Hella. "After all the practice we did last night of sensing somebody by their flame, Venra couldn't move fast enough. But Farah couldn't have cut her explosion any closer. That was a massive risk. All in all, I'd say she left a serious impression on the others. What do you think, Avatar?" he asked, turning to look at Hella. "Think? She's terrifying, that's what I think." "I'll give you that," Fald concurred. "Speaking of terrifying, guess who Finn has next?" Suddenly, Hela remembered the order of events and snapped back into a state of familiar anxiety. Finn! He's got that monster from Torin's tribe now! Yep, this is the real test for your brother. He's a smart kid, though. He can keep that giant guessing. That may be enough to win, as long as his opponent doesn't get a hand on the little guy. Adun reprised his position in front of the rock and called forth the next match. We now begin the second round of matches in this tournament of the Horn. Beginning on side 1, we have Senna of Kull versus Bathor of Alta. Competitors, step forth! Senna and Bathor walked forward and took their spots opposite each other. The difference could not have been more stark. The smallest competitor by far against one of the largest men Hela had ever seen. She watched, her heart racing, as Adun retreated to the competitor lineup. Oh, Finn, why are you doing this to me? I swear to Grom, if that beast so much as bloodies your lip, I'll crush his skull! Adun's hand rose, and then came down in a blink. Begin! Okay, you've got the hang of turning your flame on and off, up and down, but you're going to need to add certain techniques, Finn, Fald said, perched on a thick tree branch. Like what? Your size makes you perfect for speed and mobility-based movements. Not that your opponents won't also be fast, but imagine a fast hülhound trying to catch a rabbit that's just as fast. You've got the advantage of being hard to touch. Play the dodge and swerve game as much as you can, waiting for a mistake. Never attack directly, and don't let them grab you. If you can keep that in mind the whole time, I'll show you a few sneaky, borderline illegal moves that'll help. Sound good? Be fast, sneak attack, don't let them catch me. Got it. Yeah, you'll be a real menace out there, I'm sure of it. Both Theutons lit their flames and shot off, Bathor toward Senna and Senna away from Bathor. The chase was on. Senna was a red streak that bounced, pivoted, and swerved down and around all 3 dimensions of the surrounding topography. However, Bathor was on him like a predator on its prey. On one occasion, Senna came so close to being intercepted that Bathor caught the edge of his shirt sleeve, tearing it off and sending the little boy spiraling 2 full rotations before righting himself with a sideways dash off a tree root. Things were getting tight. I need to use one of Fald's tricks to shake this guy, Senna thought. Setting his jaw, he crouched down low at full speed, skidding through loose gravel and sprung straight up through a canopy of leaves. The crowd oohed and awed, pointing at Senna, who was some 50 lengths above the ground by now. Fald had warned him against going airborne. That was when a Theuton was most vulnerable. In midair, there was nowhere to hide and nothing to redirect yourself off of. The first person in a Theuton match to go airborne always becomes a floating target for the other until they touch down again. Bathor didn't miss a beat. Instead of following Senna through the canopy blindly, he shot backward into the clearing to get a good read on his aerial target. Once he located Senna and made out his trajectory, he crouched down and blasted off at an intercept arc straight towards him. Senna saw the flare of red and the streak that was coming his way. I hope this works, Fald, he muttered as he pulled his right hand behind his head, winding up. Bathor was closing fast, almost close enough now to make out his facial features. Now! Senna shouted. Raising his flame higher, he whipped his arm hard towards the incoming opponent, releasing a handful of gravel he'd scooped up before taking to the air. Trapped in his own unchangeable trajectory, Bathor barely managed to get his hands up in time to shield his face. The hail of tiny stones showered down at speed, slicing numerous small lacerations over Bathor's arms, shoulders, and scalp. As the massive Theuton hung there with his hands over his eyes, Senna flipped and landed a double heel strike to the back of Bathor's head. This impact changed both of their arcs, sending Senna towards the clearing and Bathor hurtling towards the edge of the forest by the cliff. Senna landed softly, using the technique Fald had taught him to dampen a steep fall with a well-placed burst of flame from his feet. Bathor wasn't so lucky. He crashed through a tree on his descent and hurled towards the edge of the cliff. Senna saw it happening as if in slow motion. He pumped his flame as high as he could and blasted off with blinding speed to try and stop his opponent's inevitable death. Diving out of the forest and sliding on his belly towards the edge, Senna managed to grab Bathor's bloodied hand and dig his own small hand into the rocky plateau, stopping them both from plummeting off its edge. Ah! Senna shrieked as his tiny body reeled from the strain. If it weren't for the flame that reinforced them, the force would have pulled his arms out of their sockets. Hold on, Bathor! Bathor, I've got you! He yelled, hanging on to the man as tightly as he could. Bathor responded by grabbing the cliff edge with his free hand and heaving himself up. Senna breathed a sigh of relief, at which point Bathor slammed a fist into his stomach, doubling his savior over onto his knees. With a swift kick to the ribs, Bathor sent Senna rolling over to face his merciless aggressor. The giant Thootin then placed a foot on the young boy's chest, booming, "It's not personal, boy. Alta lost their warrior, and I've come back to reclaim what we deserve." Adun came running out of the woods toward the falling competitor. "Desist! Desist!" he repeated. "This match is over! The winner is Bathor of Alta by way of pin!" Bathor stepped off of Senna, who, after catching his breath, stood up and reached his hand out towards his foe. "I understand. Good match, Bathor." The colossal man bent down and placed his hand on the child's shoulder. "Good match, boy. You fought well. You bring honor to your people with your courtesy as well." "Come now," Adun addressed them, "back to the gathered to complete this tournament." The three returned to the clearing, where a waiting crowd met them with anticipation in their eyes. "The winner of this round by way of pin and moving on to the finals is..." Hela held her breath, seeing the bloodied state of Bathor and the relatively unscathed state of Senna. "Bathor of Alta!" "What?" Hela shouted in disbelief. Senna looked down and shrugged. "Sorry, Hela." Breaking all formality, Hela ran into the clearing and scooped her brother up into her arms. "Don't you dare say sorry to me! You were amazing, Finn!" She smiled through tears of pride and relief. You were strong!" The two hugged each other. Adun spoke up. Yes, well, let's move things along now, you two." He attempted to shoo Hela off the competition area. "I'll tell you about it later, Hela," Senna said. "I'm going to watch Farah now from the competitor line." She put him down and made her way back to Fald. Hela was so proud of her little sibling. He was stronger than she ever knew. Now she could see the Thootin warrior he was becoming right in front of her eyes, and it gave her hope. "In the second match of Side 2, Adun announced, Farah of Erunt will face Galib of Sundra to decide who will compete against Bathor of Alta to be anointed warrior and melded with the hülhound Beric." Farah stepped forward before Adun was even finished. Galib, a middle-aged man of average build with short hair and just a few tufts of facial hair, joined her, lifting his chin. Adun stepped back to the competitor lineup with his arm raised and then dropped it. "Begin!" This time, both Galib and Farah lit up immediately. She strafed diagonally forward and planted her foot on the ground to Galib's left. Galib tracked her movement and her stopping position. Then, pivoting on his left foot, he threw a blazing right roundhouse kick. Farah didn't even have time to dodge it and took the full brunt in the center of her mass, which knocked her backward across the ground. She was stunned by the well-timed strike, but scrambled to her hands and knees quick enough to see an incoming direct lunge headed for her. Without any forethought, Farah rolled to her right, only just avoiding a front kick that would have landed right on her face. Galib pivoted again, raising his right leg over his head and coming down with a powerful axe kick. Farah raised both arms over her head to block the impending strike. When Galib's heel met Farah's forearms, an explosion of red energy erupted from the impact, blinding everyone watching. There were groans and moans of pain from the crowd as they threw their hands over their eyes. Hela's eyes stung and watered from the flash. As her vision cleared, she could see Farah holding Galib's striking leg on her left shoulder while he bounced on his other leg to maintain his balance. "Whoa!" Hela exclaimed to Fald. "She caught his kick! This is her chance," he said. "She should strike between his legs to the nasty bits like I showed her." But Farah didn't strike Galib to the groin. Instead, she pushed him back, keeping his leg shelved on her shoulder. Galib hopped backward to stop from falling, meanwhile trying to punch at Farah's head that was mostly protected behind his own leg. Farah, looking down at Galib's hopping foot, timed its descent and crossed her left leg to step on it. Then she leaned back just far enough to load her right leg for a side kick. She struck the front of Galib's left knee at a downward angle, breaking his leg with a grotesque snap in an unnatural direction. Hela almost heaved up her food watching the man's leg fold backward like a bird's knee. Galib let out a horrific shriek as he fell to the ground, but was quickly silenced as Farah slammed her elbow into his jaw with a downward strike, knocking him unconscious. "Desist! Desist!" Adun shouted as he ran to Galib's rescue. Farah stood over the crippled man, teeth gritted, breathing heavily, her eyes wild. Adun raised his hand, cradling Galib's head with the other, and announced, "The winner of this match is Farah of a run-spite knockout. Now someone come help me with Galib. He must be brought to the town healer with haste. This tournament will resume after he's received healing attention." A few onlookers ran forward and aided Adun in supporting the fallen competitor. They all raised their flames and sprang off through the woods toward the town center. Fald used this interlude to talk to Farah, who had since lowered her flame and her competitive demeanor to a simmer. He threw up his hands. "You're in the finals now, Farah! Maybe you didn't have to go quite so savage against that guy, though. Just some unsolicited advice. And it's not because I'm judging your choice of attack either. It's just you were on the edge of what Adun could have called uncivilized behavior, and then you'd lose, so, don't lose over that is all." Farah huffed and rolled her eyes. She then motioned with her eyes over toward Bathor, who was standing in the competitor line, staring at her with his arms crossed. "Yeah, he's gonna be tough. I don't know how strong his flame is because we didn't see him max it out against Senna. But from that match, it looks like he's pretty eager to take the offensive. That makes me think his flame is either pretty powerful or at least more powerful than anyone he's had to deal with. So that makes it a mystery, and I don't like fighting mysteries. You should treat him like you know he's stronger than you and pick your moment to strike." Fald paused, narrowing his eyes at the imposing Thutan. "But when you do, hit him with everything you've got." Adun and the helpers who had taken Galib to the town healer finally returned. Adun stood in front of the central rock to address the gathered. "Galib of Sundra will recover. The healer believes he may have a permanent limp, but by the grace of Grom he will recover." The crowd muttered among themselves. Many seemed undecided whether that was good news or not. "Now, my brothers and sisters in Grom, we have reached the final and decisive match in this tournament of the Horn. Please stand clear of the area as I call up our two finalists. From side 1, Bathor of Ulta." Bathor's Alturian comrades all yelled, "Who?" raising their flames in solidarity for their countrymen. Bathor walked forward, responding to them with a raised fist that he slammed into his chest twice. "And from side 2, Adun continued, Farah of Erunt." As Farah stalked forward with her fists clenched, Hela recoiled at the feral grin on her face. Despite being barely half the size of Bathor, Farah seemed to be the more menacing of the two competitors. "May Grom's will be shown," Adun shouted. Stepping back out of the competition area, he raised his hand, looking one last time at the two finalists, then brought it down. "Begin!" Both Bathor and Farah ignited and shot directly toward each other, colliding in a flash of red. The symmetrical impact launched both Thutans off each other at an angle, like two rocks hitting each other in midair. The next few seconds were hard for Hela to track as similar impact explosions seemed to erupt all over the competition clearing. "It's like Scatter and Torin," Hela remarked, trying to get a lock on the action. "Yeah, you're right," Fald said. "They're matching power for power. Neither one wants to take the defensive. So much for my advice." Suddenly, after a large aerial explosion, Bathor crashed down to one knee, creating a crater in the ground. Farah deflected her trajectory off the upper part of a tree trunk and hurled down diagonally toward her grounded opponent. Hela saw it happen this time since one competitor wasn't moving. Farah's descent came loaded with a fully cocked punch. Bathor looked up to see it as well, raising both arms to yell, "No!" A thunderous red explosion blew every tree in its radius backward, showering leaves far beyond them and blinding those looking at it. Hela realized she must have blinked at just the right time to avoid the brunt of the flare. Squinting hard, she saw Bathor's back against the center rock, with Farah's arm outstretched toward him. However, the young girl's fist was caught between Bathor's massive palms. "He stopped that?" Hela announced with shock. Neither of the combatants moved. Hela watched them, frozen in place as Farah maxed her flame out, trying to push her fist through Bathor's grip. She looked dead set on impacting his chin, while he was determined to hold it back. The frenetic battle of power had suddenly turned into a static battle of wills. Hela watched in awe as neither Thutan ceded their position. Farah gritted her teeth, grunting with animalistic drive while keeping her flame as high as she possibly could. Bathor also seemed to be maxing his flame to withstand her zero-sum assault, but a few moments into the stalemate, Helen noticed his arms beginning to vibrate. He's buckling, Fald, she said with rising anticipation. He's gonna fold! To Hela's shock, he roared, I will not fail you, Tauren! With a final blast of full-strength flame, Bathor changed the angle of his hands, wrenching Farah's fist violently downward. Crack! Farah's entire fist tore off her arm, leaving 2 shattered bones protruding through the blood and muscle of where it used to be.
Child, hear me, child.
Farah could hear the voice, but couldn't see where it was coming from. Everything around her was dark. Then, suddenly, 2 massive red eyes opened up in the black sky over her head.
Child, wilt thou fight? Wilt thou win? Wilt thou champion my will unto finality?
She should have been terrified, but somehow the voice calmed her. It felt right and true. I will do it. I will fight.
Believest thou in me, child? If thou becomest anointed of me, verily shall I bless thee with the deepest yearning of thine own heart. And only if by thy hands thou smiteth all who stand opposed to thine anointing, that none be left standing, only then shall I remit thy longing unto ye.
Farah's heart filled with gratitude. She felt beloved, adored, chosen, destined. I will do as you say. I promise you I will, with my whole heart. At that declaration, she snapped awake, eyes wide open, staring at the roof of Fald's family guest house. It was still dark, but the vision of red eyes and their message were seared into her mind. There was no way she was going back to sleep. Swinging her feet out of bed, she tiptoed outside for some fresh air. When she opened the front door to step onto the deck, she saw Hela and Drom already perched outside on it. Can't sleep either? Time froze. The sight of Farah's disembodied hand dripping blood in Bathor's grip sent a bolt of ice down Hela's spine. The feeling was replaced almost instantaneously by a fire that rose within her. Her flame suddenly burst forth on its own. Hela's feet wanted to move on their own accord, but as they loaded up, Adun rushed forward with his flame alight as well. Decid! Before he could finish the word, his voice was drowned out by a barbaric scream. It was Farah! In what seemed like simultaneous actions, Adun trying to stop the match, Hela's flame erupting, and Farah's guttural scream, Farah pulled her severed forearm backward and plunged it, jagged bones first, through Bathor's eye socket and out the back of his skull. Adun skidded to a halt. Hela froze in place. Bathor's body slid, limp, off Farah's mutilated limb. For a moment in time, everyone in the Forest of Arunt stood silent and still. Then, pandemonium broke out. The Alturian contingent all raised their flames and shouted with rage for their fallen tribesmen. Fald lit his own flame and bolted to Farah's aid, standing between her and the mob, and Hela immediately joined him. Bathor's compatriots lunged towards their kinsman's murderer, but were intercepted by Adun, who exploded in a violent red eruption. Restrain yourselves, or suffer your brother's fate! The flash and its accompanying shockwaves stifled the gang of would-be avengers and froze them in place. This match has been decided! Adun continued with authority. Bathor of Alta was disqualified for the dismemberment of Farah of Arunt. She murdered Bathor! One Alturian shouted in protest. She must suffer! She defended her life, which is a sacred right for all who live, Adun countered. The dispute was between Bathor and Farah. It was ended between Bathor and Farah. If you wish to begin a new dispute as Alturians, we will end it as Aruntians. That promise seemed to quash any desire for retribution among those from the tribe of Alta. One by one, they lowered their flames, gathered up Bathor's body, and stalked out of the forest. Adun turned to Hela, narrowed his eyes, and nodded. Farah turned to Fald, holding her mangled and bloodied stump, looked him square in the eyes, and said, "It hurts," then fainted into his arms. Musings of the Watchers. Being that the purpose of a tournament is to simulate battle, injury is acceptable within reason. However, any injury deemed grievous by the supervising watcher shall result in automatic disqualification, as it prevents unsuccessful combatants from entering future anointing tournaments. In the unlikely event of a fatality during the tournament, the right of Kuloth can be invoked by an anointed warrior of Grom to determine Grom's will in the matter.